So, the title of my talk today, Volunteers, Unpaid Staff or Superheroes? Well, I'm going to dodge the question slightly, and in trying to think about what to say, I remember as a 13 or 14-year-old the advice of my English language teacher, who after giving me yet another C- for my work, said, "Write me an essay about something that you have experienced." So I went away and I wrote about trout fishing with my father in the Highlands of Scotland. And to my surprise and amazement, I got an A. So I put that lesson to good use in talks and speeches that I've given since. The questions that came to me were, why do we volunteer? And what is volunteering? Do we volunteer to assuage our conscience? It's about the giving something back feeling. Because we have the time to, or we can afford to. For myself, speaking as a late baby boomer, where my life and career were still trying to be mapped out for me, I have been a casual volunteer for a good part of my life, but it's only in the last 2 years that I have been getting serious about it. If we look at what is volunteering, I can think of two options, the informal and the formal. By informal, I mean such activities as helping at a church event, running a university club like this, there's a lot of volunteers today, or helping somebody to rebuild their house. Things I suspect many of us here have done or do or take part in normally. The formal approach implies structure and commitment and sacrifice. I qualified as a dinghy sailing instructor and gave up my weekends and various weeks in the summer to teach mainly kids to sail. I went to Nepal for 5 months to build schools, and I'm here in Malaysia for 4 months to help a community find a way forward. The example I gave of helping to rebuild houses is one that could span across both approaches. I have spent many weekends helping friends with their house extensions, but in 2016 I spent 10 months working alongside my brother-in-law as he completely refurbished his house. So why does someone who was managing partner of a firm of Chartered Surveyors with 10 years to go to retirement and reasonably financially secure suddenly change course and face total uncertainty and insecurity? That's certainly the question my daughters asked me when I told them I was planning to do this. I suspect that the majority of the audience here today would be classified as millennials. And the refreshing thing about you is that even though you might qualify as engineers or lawyers, there seems to be no commitment to following that course to retirement. I would say at this point, of course, my perspective on all of this is from a Western approach, so it may be that you have a different outlook, but I will soldier on that basis. Now, I realise that I might be generalising a bit here, and equally, as I've said, this could apply more to Western society. But of the 4 millennials that I'm currently working with, 2 don't have a job to go to at the end of our programme at the moment. 1 is taking a sabbatical, and only 1 of the 4 is Western. So there's some very scientific, dubious scientific data for you. But in my travels over the last 2 years, I have met a big cross-section of age groups, and time and again people were taking time out, either in a structured way via a sabbatical, or having left their jobs with no clear plans as to what they were going to do on their return. And I find this incredibly refreshing. It's all about going on a journey, literally and metaphorically. The millennials, with no fixed ideas about career paths, are doing it early on. And the baby boomers and Generation X's are turning to it later in life. That said, those of us who are over 50 have more a dilemma, I think. And the reaction I get from those I talk to ranges from, that's very courageous or noble of you, to wishing that they could do the same thing and being very envious. And some have admitted even to living vicariously through me as I tell of my adventures through my WhatsApp group. My parents had a strong sense of duty and values, and their lives were led with a very clear path in front of them. But they lived in incredible times. My father was in the colonial service, working here in KL and then in Sabah until independence in 1963. And my sister was born in KL and I was born in Sabah. And I believe that my formative years out here have shaped what I am trying to achieve. What has all this got to do with volunteering? I think I'm trying to set the scene, and again, referring back to my English teacher, talking about my experiences. Volunteering is a way of putting something back. Even if you can't change your life and run off to Africa or Asia, you can still make a difference to other people's lives. Have an open mind. Be prepared to change. I think too many people don't do something because they feel the time isn't right. But that's a cop-out. Because when you think the time is right, the moment will have passed. So listen to your heart and don't be ruled by your head. Remember, this isn't a dry run. I have had what could be defined as 2 midlife crises. In my 40s, when I was under huge pressures at work and leading a very full home life with a growing family, I checked out for a while. And then again in my 50s, but in a very different way. It was more of a realization that this was the time to change. And thankfully I listened to my heart and seized the day. Carpe diem, which more fully, or the translation more fully, is seize the day, put very little trust in tomorrow. And I believe I've been living like this for a while now. So how did I get to standing here in front of you today? Well, towards the end of 2015, a friend of mine challenged me to go somewhere where I had always wanted to. So with some trepidation, I booked a flight to Buenos Aires and spent 2 months traveling around Argentina and Chile and Bolivia, and had a wonderful time and proved that I could survive on my own. I then spent the rest of the year working with my brother-in-law rebuilding their Northumbrian farmhouse. And during that time I was researching getting into disaster reconstruction and humanitarian aid work, and realizing that I needed to do more volunteering to prove to those who might give me a job that I was serious. And for me, with the earthquake still fairly fresh in the mind, Nepal was the obvious place to go. By chance, when I was looking at the website of the company that one of my daughters was working for, I saw that they sponsored a charity who were involved in education in Nepal. So I wrote to them and asked if I could be of any help. They said no, but their sister charity, the Paha Trust, thank you, the Paha Trust for Nepal, had been building schools out there for 25 years. So I wrote to them, and after some toing and froing, they offered me a job, unpaid, as project manager to run a couple of rebuilds in Lamjung district. Bingo. And so in early January of this year, I landed in Kathmandu with a 3-month tourist visa. That's all the volunteers do have. Work visas cost a fortune and involve a pile of paperwork. My base for the 3 months was to be Pokhara, which is a wonderful city with the Annapurna Range as its back. The two schools where I was working were an 8-hour bus ride in one of those amazing local buses, which are the lifeline of the communities in the mountains. They stop for everybody and take everything. The journeys were in equal measure breathtaking on account of the scenery that you pass through, and terrifying when looking out at the open bus door to a 1,000-foot drop inches away. In fact, there were 2 occasions when there was a mass exodus from the bus as the ground that we were driving over started to give way. The second of my 2 schools was in a village called Gamrang, which was at the end of the road at a height of 6,500 feet, and at the eastern end of the Annapurna Range, in the shadow of Lamjung Himal. The school itself had been badly damaged in the earthquake, and the first story had been taken down. It became apparent when I got on site that the plans I had been given for the project were totally inaccurate. So my first job was to resurvey and redesign the whole thing, and then go back to Pokhara and speak to the contractor doing the steel work and agree the redesign. After that, there were battles with the suppliers. Materials were delivered by tractor and trailer from the nearest town, which was 4 hours away. But no one wanted to make the trip up the mountain. So it was always a struggle. And when the materials finally arrived, the tractor was usually driven by a couple of lads who invariably got stuck or dropped things in the wrong place. But we persevered. Equally, getting the workforce to stay was a constant problem. And often the time when I was told by my young Nepali project supervisor that the men were leaving that morning, never thinking that I needed to know a week in advance so that we could line up replacements. Advanced planning simply doesn't feature in the Nepali mindset. But throughout all of this was the delight from seeing the children every morning with bright eyes and a welcoming namaste, so eager to be learning. And they would follow me around and prod each other to dare someone to ask me a question in English. And my response would induce fits of giggles. My stay coincided with the end of term, so I was roped in as the special guest to do the honours for the prize giving. And when I left, they had a special feast, and there were presentations and speeches, and I was quite overwhelmed. But their gratitude was heartfelt, and I was very humbled by the experience. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to stay to the end of the project, but this is the building now completed and being occupied. Just before I arrived in Nepal, someone told me about another INGO, All Hands Volunteers. And they looked like an interesting organisation, so I applied to join them. And they were in Nepal within 72 hours of the earthquake, and are still there now and for the foreseeable future. They have a base in Sindhapachok district and have built 6 or 7 schools, having obtained funding from a partner organisation. Their model is pretty unique when it comes to charities in the third sector. They're looking for people of any age, quite literally, to work for a few days or a few months. It doesn't matter. They provide food and accommodation, and they charge you nothing. The only proviso is that you will work. And it doesn't matter if you don't know how to wield a hammer. You just need to have enthusiasm and energy and a sense of humour. We were building two classroom buildings as part of a school that had been badly damaged in the earthquake. Just to put things in perspective, 8,500 schools were either destroyed or badly damaged in the earthquake. And to date, only between 2,500 and 3,000 have been rebuilt. All Hands is a very different organisation. They are full of mostly young people who have boundless energy and enthusiasm. And I was incredibly impressed by what they are doing. They aren't disaster tourists. They work incredibly hard and selflessly to make things a bit better for such a noble people. I was equally humbled by them, although I had a totally different experience. So what about Malaysia? Well, I got back to the UK in June and quickly started to look at where to go next. And by chance, I saw a posting on Facebook about the VIP fellowship scheme, volunteering for international professionals. This is a scheme that is funded by the Ministry of Finance to improve the social welfare and well-being of various communities throughout the country. It's the third year of the scheme, and each year they choose 10 projects and select 30 international professionals and 20 local people to run them. I was immediately drawn to the concept and wasn't put off by a very detailed application form. And eventually, after a Skype interview, I got the news that I'd been selected, and 7 weeks ago I landed in KL. So let me tell you about Positive Living Community, the organisation that 5 of us are helping. It's a home that caters for men with HIV and AIDS and other addictions, some of whom are also disabled and all are homeless. Based in Batu Arang, an hour out of KL, PLC is run by an incredible man, Alex Aroko, who for 20 years has been championing the cause of these men and selflessly devoting every waking minute to them. There are 60 residents in 4 homes, ranging from those who are bedridden and have to be helped with every aspect of their lives and probably will never leave, to those who can do some work but are not ready to deal with life outside in the real world. And there are some who have jobs outside the community and are preparing to leave. They also take in Burmese refugees for the UN. They have a small farm and some livestock and produce misai kuching tea. However, they are in a mess and badly need some help to sort things out. Alex freely admits that management isn't his strong point. They rely entirely on donations and some external funding, and our remit is to put in place systems to provide stable management, devise strong and sustainable revenue streams, and provide the residents with therapies and a structure to their lives that has been missing. All in 4 months, a tall order, but one that the 5 of us have embraced and will do whatever we can to achieve it. And when you spend time with these men, even those whose stories are heartrending, you can see a glimmer of light in their eyes. And it is up to us to try and give them a reason to feel positive about their lives. We have already had 2 very successful days clearing up the site, with brave people volunteering to help us. And we have shifted numerous skips, and the enthusiasm amongst the residents has been palpable. Surin, there, still working away, even with 1 leg. We are also hoping to construct a new building that will allow the residents to have somewhere they can learn new skills and have a proper recreation area, and where meetings can be held. So, to very badly paraphrase a well-known line from Star Wars, we only have 9 weeks left to save the community. Who will come and help us? Volunteers, unpaid staff, or superheroes? I think it's unpaid superheroes. What do you think? Thank you.